I'm gonna record 'em. Welcome, everybody. My name is Liz Cannon, and I direct our LGBTQ plus Resource Center here on campus, and my pronouns are A, M, and airs. I ask if audience members will turn off their videos and their microphones as we go. And do note that we have put our evaluation form in the chat, so hopefully everybody could fill that out when we're done. I am very excited about tonight's program. We have been doing queer dramatic readings. I think I started it the first year I started the Resource Center. So for about 12 years now. And one of the things I love about this performance is that it is always one of my interns that organizes it, picks the reading, picks the theme. And this year, Lux has done an amazing job, and I think you are going to really enjoy what we've put together for you, what Lux has put together for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Lux.
Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the LGBTQ plus Resource Center to our queer dramatic readings. Thank you for making the time in your schedule to join everyone tonight. My name is Lux. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am the Educational Outreach Coordinator at the LGBTQ plus Resource Center. The theme of tonight's readings is Invisible Identities, which includes a variety of readings from poetry to film scenes or pages from books to lyrics from a song. Many of the readings tonight are available at the Resource Center's library and will be performed by faculty, staff, and students of the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh campus. Sorry, that was a mouthful. And then I'm going to try to share the PowerPoint. And there we go. So some of the intersecting identities discussed in the readings may not align with the identities of the performers tonight. Instead, focus on the words being spoken for the voices of those with an invisible identity. Our first reading will be performed by Dr. Liz Cannon, pronouns AM airs, from Recognize the Voices of Bisexual Men.
Why It Matters by Gregory Lyndon Smith. You might well ask why it matters. If I'm homoromantic and only date men, why do I come out as bisexual? If I never find a female partner, why does my sexual orientation matter at all? It's certainly not the only thing that matters. It matters that I'm trans. It matters that I have a mental illness. It matters that I have an older brother who makes me think. It matters that my mom is advancing through the stages of Alzheimer's disease. It matters that I take a walk almost every day with my dad. It matters that I write letters to political officials. I feel the need to come out as bi in all of my groups and relationships. Usually, people say nothing in response. Occasionally, someone will make a remark about people who come out as bi and change their minds, although people can change their minds about any identity. Once a boss asked me what my position was on monogamy. She would not have asked this of a gay or straight employee. But usually the conversation moves on to other things. Part of what matters is that it took me a long time to accept who I am, and that hard-fought journey is part of what defines me. It's not something I figured out in my ostensible girlhood, although I liked boys, and my Barbies were sexually active with each other. I was 27 when I admitted to myself that I was sexually attracted to women, 29 when I accepted that I am bisexual, and 31 when, after a period of questioning, I realized I am not a woman myself. Now I'm almost 43 and starting to come to terms with the possibility that I might not meet the man of my dreams, even after all the fighting we've done for my right to marry him. But there's something more than history that tells me that being a bisexual man is an important part of who I am. I have a deep love for truth and a yearning to be known and accepted as the person I really am. The details may require a conversation, but the truth is that I'm bi and I want people to know it. I want them to know that they know someone like me. Even though I only have romantic feelings for men, not a day goes by when I don't see in advertisements or encounter at the grocery store both men and women I find attractive. This isn't something I can turn off because I only date men or because I'm alone. It's always there. It's part of who I am. Some of the people whom I want to know are also bi people. I want them to know there is nothing embarrassing or less than or necessary to hide about who they are. It matters to me that they know they are not alone and that I know I am not alone. At a bisexual meeting, someone suggested that I wouldn't need to meet other bi people if I'm not poly. I disagree. It's essential to know we're not alone. Today, my bisexual day involves going to breakfast, going to church, writing, sorting, communicating online, listening to the radio, and watching TV. None of these things are very sexy, I'm afraid. I wish all of the people who think bisexuality is extreme could know about my day today. I wish they could know how deeply I fall for a man when I fall. I wish they could understand why all of it, questioning and coming out and starting to date again, is worth it after all, because it is liberating to be who we really are. It matters. It matters very much.
Thank you. I will be joining M. Garvey, they, them, theirs, during this next reading from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
Thank you, Lex. This is We Should All Be Feminists. In Lagos, I cannot go alone into many reputable clubs and bars. They just don't let you in if you are a woman alone. You must be accompanied by a man. And so I have male friends who arrive at clubs and end up going in with their arms linked with those of a complete stranger, because that complete stranger, a woman on her own, had no choice but to ask for help to get into the club. Each time I walk into a Nigerian restaurant with a man, the waiter greets the man and ignores me. The waiters are products of a society that has taught them that men are more important than women. And I know that they don't intend harm, but it is one thing to know something intellectually and quite another to feel it emotionally. Each time they ignore me, I feel invisible. I feel upset. I want to tell them that I'm just as human as the man, just as worthy of acknowledgement.
These are little things, but sometimes it is the little things that sting the most.
We spend too much time teaching girls to worry about what boys think of them, but the reverse is not the case. We don't teach boys to care about being likable. We spend too much time telling girls that they cannot be angry or aggressive or tough, which is bad enough, but then we turn around and either praise or excuse men for the same reasons. All over the world, there are so many magazine articles and books telling women what to do, how to be, and not to be in order to attract or please men. There are far fewer guides for men about pleasing women.
Gender matters everywhere in the world. And I would like today to ask that we should begin to dream about and plan for a different world, a fairer world, a world of happier people who are truer to themselves. And this is how to start. We must raise our daughters differently. We must also raise our sons differently. We do a great disservice to boys and how we raise them. We stifle the humanity of boys. We define masculinity in a very narrow way. Masculinity is hard, small cage we put boys inside. We teach boys to be afraid of fear, weakness, of vulnerability. We teach them to mask their true selves because they have to be, in Nigerian speak, a hard man.
Of course, because of their historical advantage, it is mostly men who will have more today. But if we start raising children differently, then in 50 years, in 100 years, boys will no longer have the pressure of proving their masculinity by material means.
But by far the worst thing we do to males by make them feel they have to be hard is that we leave them with very fragile egos. The harder a man feels compelled to be, the weaker his ego is.
And then we do a much greater disservice to girls because we raise them to cater to the fragile egos of males. We teach girls to shrink themselves, to make themselves smaller. We say to girls, you can have ambition, but not too much. You need to be successful, but not too successful. Otherwise, you will threaten the man. If you're the breadwinner in your relationship with a man, pretend that you are not, especially in public. Otherwise, you will emasculate him.
But what if we question the premise itself? Why should a woman's success be a threat to a man? What if we decide to simply dispose of that word? And I don't know if there is an English word I dislike more than emasculation. Gender is not an easy conversation to have. It makes people uncomfortable, sometimes even irritable. Both men and women are resistant to talk about gender or are quick to dismiss the problems of gender because thinking of changing the status quo is always uncomfortable.
Some people ask, why the word feminist? Why not just say you are a believer in human rights or something like that? Because that would be dishonest. Feminism is, of course, part of human rights in general, but to choose to use the vague expression human rights is to deny the specific and particular problem of gender.
It would be a way of pretending that it was not women who have for centuries been excluded. It would be a way of denying that the problem of gender targets women, that the problem was not about being human, but specifically about being a female human.
For centuries, the world divided human beings into two groups and then proceeded to exclude and oppress one group. It is only fair that the solution to the problem should acknowledge that.
Some men feel threatened by the idea of feminism. This comes, I think, from the insecurity triggered by how boys are brought up, how their sense of self-worth is diminished if they are not naturally in charge as men.
Other men might respond by saying, okay, this is interesting, but I don't think like that. I don't even think about gender. Maybe not. And that is part of the problem.
Next, Hector Ortega, he, him, his, will be reading from Borderlands, La Frontera.
Much of what the culture condemns focuses on kinship relationships. The welfare of the family, the community, and the tribe is more important than the welfare of the individual. The individual exists first as kin, as sister, as father, as padrino, and last as self. In my culture, selfishness is condemned, especially in women. Humility and selfishness, the absence of selfishness, is considered a virtue. In the past, acting humble with members outside the family ensured that you would make no one envidioso, envious. Therefore, he or she would not use witchcraft against you. If you get above yourself, you're an envidiosa. If you don't behave like everyone else, la gente will say that you think you're better than others. Que te crees grande. With ambition comes envy. Respeto carries with it a set of rules so that social categories and hierarchies will be kept in order. Respect is reserved for la abuela, papa, el patrón, those with power in the community. Women are at the bottom of the ladder, one rung above the deviants. The Chicano, Mexicano, and some Indian cultures have no tolerance for deviance. Deviance is whatever is condemned by the community. Most societies try to get rid of their deviance. Most cultures have burned and beaten their homosexuals and others who deviate from the sexual common. The queer are the mirror reflecting the heterosexual tribe's fear, being different, being other and therefore lesser, therefore subhuman, inhuman, non-human. There was a muchacha who lived near my house. La gente del pueblo talked about her being una de las otras, one of the others. They said that for 6 months, she was a woman who had a vagina that bled one, and that for the other 6 months, she was a man, had a penis, and she peed standing up. They called her half and half, mita y mita. Neither one nor the other, but a strange doubling, a deviation of nature that horrified, a work of nature inverted. But there is a magic aspect in abnormality and so-called deformity. Maimed, maddened, sexually different people were believed to possess supernatural powers by primal culture's magical religious thinking. For them, abnormality was the price a person had to pay for her or his inborn extraordinary gift. There's something compelling about being both male and female, about having an entry into both worlds. Contrary to some psychiatric tenets, half and halves are not suffering from a confusion of sexual identity, or even from a confusion of gender. What we are suffering from is an absolute despot duality that says we are able to only be one or the other. It claims that human nature is limited and cannot evolve into something better. But I, like other queer people, am two in one body, both male and female. I am the embodiment of Hieros Gamos, the coming together of opposite qualities within. For the lesbian of color, the ultimate rebellion she can make against her native culture is through her sexual behavior. She goes against two moral prohibitions, sexuality and homosexuality. Being lesbian and raised Catholic, indoctrinated as straight, I made the choice to be queer. It's an interesting path, one that continually slips in and out of the white, the Catholic, the Mexican, the indigenous, the in and out of my head. It makes for loqueria, the crazies. It is a path of knowledge, one of knowing the history of oppression of our raza. It is a way of balancing, of mitigating duality. In a New England college where I taught, the presence of a few lesbians threw the more conservative heterosexual students and faculty into a panic. The two lesbian students and we two lesbian instructors met with them to discuss their fears. One of the students said, I thought homophobia meant fear of going home after a residency. And I thought, how apt, fear of going home and of not being taken in. We're afraid of being abandoned by the mother, the culture, la raza, for being unacceptable, faulty, damaged. Most of us unconsciously believe that if we reveal this unacceptable aspect of the self, our mother, culture, race will totally reject us. To avoid rejection, some of us conform to the values of the culture, push the unacceptable parts into the shadows, which leaves only one fear, that we will be found out and that the shadow beast will break out of its cage. Some of us take another route. We try to make ourselves conscious of the shadow beast, stare at the sexual lust and lust for power and destruction we see on its face, discern among its features the undershadow that the reigning order of heterosexual males project on our beast. Yet still others of us take it another step. We try to awaken the shadow beast inside of us. Not many jump at the chance to confront the shadow beast in the mirror without flinching at her lidless serpent eyes, her cold, clammy, moist hand dragging us underground, fangs bared and hissing. How does one put feathers on this particular serpent? But a few of us have been lucky. On the face of the shadow beast, we have seen not lust, but tenderness. On its face, we have uncovered the lie.
Thank you, Hector. Dr. Kathleen Corley, she, her, hers, will read from Transforming the Bible and the Lives of Transgendered Christians.
Did God Make a Mistake? By Austin Hartke. Whenever I go to speak with Christians who are unfamiliar with transgender folks, it seems as if we spend the first few minutes dancing around the question they really want to ask. Not, have you had surgery? Or what's your real name? Though I've heard those too. And I always take a moment to remind people that those questions aren't appropriate or a good way to start a conversation. No, the question I get the most often sounds more like this. So if God made you female, but you identify as male, does that mean that you think God made a mistake? I asked myself that same question for a long time before coming out as transgender. As a teenager, I believed strongly in the idea that everything happens for a reason. And if that was true, then there must have been a reason God had made me with a body that was designated female when I was born. Even though I'd known for most of my life that I didn't feel like a girl, I did my best to ignore that fact and push it down deep where I didn't have to think about it. The biggest hurdle I faced in addressing my gender identity was that it seemed like saying God was wrong. So imagine my relief when I started coming across scripture passages that appeared to have something to say about gender identity and the way God made the world. In seminary, I read the Bible cover to cover and spent hours in the library poring over books about creation narratives, clothing in the ancient world, and the meaning of the incarnation. I learned from Job that sometimes things happen in the world that don't make much sense to us human beings. I learned from Abraham what it's like to have your name changed. I learned from the Apostle Philip that sometimes you have to say yes to God even when you have no idea what God is doing. And of course, I learned from Jesus, who after his resurrection chose to show his body to the disciples, a body that was scarred and transformed, yet still his own. The more I learned, the more I felt compelled to open up myself to the world. I wanted to take out the parts of myself that I had packed away out of sight and to let them breathe in the sunshine. It almost felt as if my heart was trying to escape my chest, pulling in the same sort of way it had when I began considering a seminary education. I decided to follow that call, and when I started talking with other transgender people and describing my experiences, I heard them speaking parts of my own story back to me. When I discovered that there were other transgender Christians, who knew? I felt as if I'd stumbled across buried treasure. Before long, I was finding my own answer to that original question. Did God make a mistake? Personally, my answer is no. I don't believe God made a mistake in creating me just as I am. God created me with a body that was designated female when I was born, a body that I struggled to connect with for the first 26 years of my life, and that I now finally feel at home in. But God also created me with a capacity for change and with a mind that identifies as male. I believe God made all of me, gender identity included, and intended for me to be a transgender person who sees the world through a different lens. I don't think God made a mistake. I think God made me transgender on purpose. After I graduated from seminary, I wasn't sure what to do next. I really wanted to keep talking with other trans Christians and to keep exploring the scripture passages that had given me so much life. I began making videos about gender-related theological topics and posting them on YouTube. And before long, people started leaving comments. Some were wonderful and some were mean-spirited. But the ones that got me the most came from transgender teenagers and young people who had desperate questions. Questions like, does God still love me if I'm trans? And my pastor says I'm going to hell. What do I do? I did my best to point towards helpful resources, but in the end, I couldn't find a written, accessible place where all kinds of different trans-affirming theologies came together. That's why I began talking with friends of mine who also identified as transgender Christians, asking them if they'd be willing to share some of the things they've learned. I certainly don't have all the answers. As a white, bisexual, transgender man, I have no idea what it's like to navigate Christian faith as a person of color, or as a non-binary person, or as a trans woman. I wanted to include some stories that end happily and some that others that don't end on such an upbeat note. Trans Christians face incredible obstacles in churches around the world. While some of us find ways to make it back into affirming communities with a faith that's still strong, not all of us have found that fountain of healing yet. So I'm thankful to the people who agreed to sit down and gift me with their time and their knowledge as this project was coming together. When I talked with the people you're about to meet in these pages, I always ended each interview with the same big question. Do you think God made a mistake? Strangely enough, even though we're all very different, we seem to agree on this subject.
Thank you. Our next reading will be performed by Dr. Michelle Kuhl, she, her, hers.
Sarah Pierce never married, and this poem, written for her close friend Abigail Smith, offers an alternative vision of female life in 1792. On rising ground we'll rear a little dome, plain, neat, and elegant it shall appear. No slaves shall there lament their native home, or silent drop the unavailing tear. Content and cheerfulness shall dwell within, and each domestic serve through love alone. Coy happiness will strive for once to win, with meek religion there to build her throne. And oft our friends shall bless the lonely vale, and social pass the wintry eves away. Or when soft summer swells the fragrant gale, delighted mark new beauties as they stray. Pleased with the scene by fancy's pencil drawn, the various landscape rushes on my view. The cultivated farm, the flowery lawn that sucks the fragrance of the honeyed dew. The fertile meadows trimmed with daisies pied, the garden breathing Flora's best perfumes, and stored with herbs whose worth by matrons tried dispels disease and gives health's roseate blooms. Here vines with purple clusters bending low, and various fruit trees loaded branches bear. There roots of every kind profusely grow, bespeaking plenty through the circling year. See yonder hillock where a golden corn waves its bright head to every passing breeze. Yon fruitful fields our sportive flocks adorn, our cows at rest beneath the neighboring trees. As misty clouds from silent streams arise, yon distant town attracts the gazer's view. Yon mount, whose lofty summit meets the skies, shelters the village on the plain below. Behind our lot a wood defies the storm, like those were druids wont in days of yore, when superstition wore religion's form, with mystic rites their unknown gods adore. Within this grove we'll oft retire to muse, where contemplation builds her silent seat. Her soothing influence she will ne'er refuse to those who wander in this blessed retreat. A river solemn murmurs through the shades, the whispering pines and echoes soft reply. Then hoarse o'er rocks, it seeks the distant glades, forming a rainbow in the moistened sky. Nor leaves us here, but through the village winds, where simply elegance in neat array might teach even pomp that not to wealth confined, genius and taste might to a cottage stray. In front, a level grass plot smooth and green, where neighboring children pass sweet hours at play, and fairies oft, if fairies e'er have been, will featly foot the moonlight hours away. Our plenteous store we'll freely give to all. Want ne'er shall pass in sorrow from our door. With joy we'll seat the beggar in our hall, and learn the tale of woe that sunk his store. But chiefly those who pine by sickness pressed, whose merit known to few unheeded lies, how sweet to banish sorrow from the breast, and bid fair hope shine sparkling in the eyes. Thus humbly blessed, when youthful years are flown, proud to be good, not wishing to be great, and swift-winged time proclaimed our moments run, resigned to heaven, will cheerful bow to fate, placed in one grave, beneath a plain smooth stone, where oft the tear unfeigned shall dew the face. The sick, the poor, shall long our fate bemoan, but wealth and grandeur never mark the place. This simple epitaph the stone adorns, which calls from artless eyes the frequent tear. Matrons and maids shall often stoop to learn, and all the village think it passing rare. The epitaph: beneath this stone, two female friends interred, who pass their lives content in solitude. They wish no ill, yet oft, though ignorance erred, reader, depart, reflect, and be as good.
Thank you. Reading from the letter will be read by Dr. Nathan Krieger, he, him, his.
This is a letter from Love Simon, acted by Nick Robinson, based on the book by Becky Albertalli. Dear students of Creekwood High, as anyone with half a decent data plan already knows, a recent post on this very website declared that I was gay. The delivery left something to be desired, but the message is true. I am gay. For a long time, I was killing myself to hide that fact. I had all these reasons. It was unfair that only gay people had to come out. I was sick of change. But the truth is, I was just scared. First, I thought it was just a gay thing. But then I realized that no matter what, announcing who you are to the world is pretty terrifying, because what if the world doesn't like you? So I did whatever I could to keep my secret. I hurt the best, most important people, and I want them to know that I'm sorry. I'm done being scared. I'm done living in a world where I don't get to be who I am. I deserve a great love story. Disclaimer, this is about to get romantic as F. So anyone adverse to gratuitous feelings, kindly click over to the BuzzFeed quiz or resume the porn you paused to read this. This guy that I love once wrote that he felt like he was stuck on a Ferris wheel. On top of the world 1 minute, rock bottom the next. That's how I feel now. I couldn't ask for more amazing friends, more understanding family, but it would all be so much better if I had someone to share it with. So Blue, I might not know your name or what you look like, but I know who you are. I know you're funny and thoughtful. You choose your words carefully and that they're always perfect. And I know that you've been pretending for so long, it's hard to believe that you can stop. I get it. Like I told you at the very beginning, I'm just like you. So Blue, after the play, Friday at 10, you know where I'll be. No pressure for you to show up, but I hope you do, because you deserve a great love story too. Love, Simon. Next, Lux Bavine, they, them, theirs, will read from Female Masculinity.
The bathroom problem. If 3 decades of feminist theorizing about gender has thoroughly dislodged the notion that anatomy is destiny, that gender is natural, and that male and female are the only options, why do we still operate in a world that assumes that people who are not male are female, and people who are not female are male, and even that people who are not male are not people? If gender has been so thoroughly defamiliarized, in other words, why do we have multiple gender options, multiple gender categories, and real life non-male and non-female options for embodiment and identification? In a way, gender's very flexibility and seeming fluidity is precisely what allows dimorphic gender to hold sway, because so few people actually match any given community standards for male or female. In other words, gender can be imprecise and therefore multiply relayed through a solid binary system. At the same time, because the definitional boundaries of male and female are so elastic, there are very few people in any given public space who are completely unreadable in terms of their gender. An ambiguous gender, when and where it does appear, is inevitably transformed into deviance, thirdness, or blurred vision of either male or female. As an example, in public bathrooms for women, various bathroom users tend to fail to measure up to the expectations of femininity. And those of us who present in some ambiguous way are routinely questioned and challenged about our presence in the wrong bathroom. For example, recently on my way to give a talk in Minneapolis, I was making a connection at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. I strode purposely into the women's bathroom. No sooner had I entered the stall than someone was knocking at the door. Open up, security here. I understood immediately what had happened. I had once again been mistaken for a man or a boy, and some woman called the security. As soon as I spoke, the 2 guards in the bathroom stall realized their error, mumbled apologies, and took off. On the way home from the same trip in the Denver airport, the same sequence of events was repeated. Needless to say, the policing of gender within the bathroom is intensified in the space of the airport, where people are literally moving through space and time in ways that cause them to want to stabilize some boundaries, gender, and even as they transverse others, national. However, having one's gender challenged in the women's restroom is frequent occurrence in the lives of many androgynous or masculine women. Indeed, it is so frequent that one wonders whether the category woman, when used to designate public functions, is completely outmoded. It is no accident then that travel hubs become zones of intense scrutiny and observation. But gender policing within the airport bathroom is merely an intensified version of a larger bathroom problem. For some gender ambiguous women, it is relatively easy to prove their right to use the women's bathroom. They can reveal some decisive gender trait, a high voice, breast, and the challenger will generally back off. For others, possibly low-voiced or hairy or breastless people, it is quite difficult to justify their presence in the women's bathroom. And these people may tend to use the men's bathroom, where scrutiny is far less intense. Obviously, in these bathroom confrontations, the gender ambiguous person first appears as not woman. You are in the wrong bathroom. Then the person appears as something actually even more scary, not man. No, I'm not. Spoken in a voice recognized as not male. Not man and not woman. The gender ambiguous bathroom user is also not androgynous or in between. This person is gender deviant. For many gender deviants, the notion of passing is singularly unhelpful. Passing as a narrative assumes that there is a self that masquerades as another kind of self and does so successfully. At various moments, the successful pass may cohere into something akin to identity. At such a moment, the passer has become. What of a biological female who presents as butch, passes as male in some circumstances, and reads as butch in others, and considers herself not to be a woman, but maintains distance from the category man? For such a subject, identity might be described as a process with multiple sites for becoming and being. To understand such a process, we need to do more than map psychic and physical journeys between male and female and within queer and straight space. We would need, in fact, to think of in fractal terms and about gender geometries. Cordelia Bolus, she, her, hers, will lead us in the next reading.
Time for Disability Studies and Future for Crypts by Allison Caper. Crypt time emerges here as a wry reference to the disability-related events that always seem to start late, or how people with disabilities can't seem to arrive anywhere on time. As one slang dictionary puts it, crypt time means both a flexible standard for punctuality and the extra time needed to arrive or accomplish something. This need for extra time might result from a slower gait, a dependency on attendants who might themselves be running late, malfunctioning equipment from wheelchairs to hearing aids, a bus driver who refuses to stop for a disabled passenger, or an ableist encounter with a stranger that throws one off schedule. Operating on crypt time then might be not only about a slower speed or movement, but also about ableist barriers over which one has little or no control. In either case, crypt time involves an awareness that people with disabilities might need more time to accomplish something or to arrive somewhere. But crypt time means more than this kind of blanket extension. It is rather a reorientation of time. As Margaret Price explains, adhering to crypt time might mean recognizing that people will arrive at various intervals and designing events accordingly. And it might also mean recognizing that people are processing language at various rates and adjusting the pace of the conversation. It is this notion of flexibility, not just extra time, that matters. Crip time is flex time, not just expanded, but exploded. It requires reimagining our notion of what can and should happen in time, or recognizing how expectations of how long things take are based on very particular minds and bodies. We can then understand the flexibility of crip time as being not only an accommodation to those who need more time, but also, and perhaps especially, a challenge to normative and normalizing expectations of pace and scheduling. Rather than bend disabled bodies and minds to meet the clock, crip time bends the clock to meet disabled bodies and minds. One could argue that queer time is crip time, and that it may have been all along. Queer time is often defined through or in reference to illness or disability, suggesting that it is illness and disability that render time queer. Not only might they cause time to slow or to be experienced in quick bursts, they can lead to feelings of asynchrony or temporal dissonance. Depression and mania are often experienced through time shifts, and people with various impairments move or think at a slower or faster pace than culturally expected. Thinking about diagnosis and undiagnosis as strange temporalities opens the door to still other framing of crip time, of illness and disability in and through time. What would constitute a temporality of mania or depression or anxiety if we think of queer time as involving archives of rage and shame? Then why not also panic attacks or fatigue? How does depression slow down time, making moments drag on for days? Or how do panic attacks cause linear time to unravel, making time seem simultaneously to speed up and slam shut, leaving one behind? This intermingling of recognition and absence, of despair and hope, renders my desire quite queer. Queer in that my want, my longing, my pleasure intensifies with the queerness of these crip bodies, these crip futures. Queer, too, in that in imagining queer crip futures, I mean more than particular identifiable bodies. I mean possibility, unpredictability, promise. The promise of recognizing crip where I did not expect to find it. The possibility of watching crip change meanings before my eyes. I name this desire queer, in part because of its ambiguity. Becoming more visible by increasing and publicizing the presence of people with disabilities does not guarantee acceptance or inclusion, especially for those not already privileged by it, by race and class. Feminist, from Minnie Bruce Pratt to Bernice Johnson Reagan to Chandra Taupid Mohanty, have cautioned that the desire for home, for familiarity, often leads to naive evocations of community. Thus, in naming and experiencing this desire, I am likely misreading and misrecognizing the bodies and practices of others. I am, in other words, finding both disability and desire where they do not necessarily belong. Surely a potentially queer and crip move. People with disabilities, particularly those with developmental and psychiatric impairments, those who are poor, gender deviant, and/or people of color, those who need atypical forms of assistance to survive, have faced sterilization, segregation, and institutionalization, denial of equitable education, healthcare, and social services, violence and abuse, and the withholding of the right of citizenship. Too many of these practices continue, and each of them has greatly limited and often literally shortened the futures of people with disabilities. It is my loss, our loss, not to take care of, embrace, and desire all of us. We must begin to anticipate presence and to imagine futures that include all of us. We must explore disability in time.
Thank you, Cordelia. This next reading will be done by Dr. Michelle Kuhl.
Female Parts by Richard M. Zhuang. Dr. Matthews, neat in her white lab coat, a decade of experience in internal medicine, has better things to do with her life than dispense Viagra and sex advice. Something in the way she stands says, "Isn't there a life I could save? This isn't an episode of ER, but I didn't go to school to help boys get booty." It is not an unreasonable position, but there I was. Bisexual sexual histories are fun to read, even more to recite. And Dr. Matthews, neat in her white lab coat, tries her best to take down just the facts, Dragnet style, and ignores my interjections. Oh, and he was cute. She was friendly. They were really nice. I miss them. Until I say, "And now I'm sexually active with a trans man." "A what?" she asks. "A trans man," I repeat, keeping it short, ready to say, "An FTM, a female to male transsexual, a man who's becoming male, a guy on T, a lean-bodied cutie, a stud muffin with hard, rugged abs and a cute little butt," if she needs to hear it. But she asks, "What parts does he have?" When people talk about parts, pieces of chicken come to mind. Breast and thighs, deep fried. Yummy as he is, the boy's not a buffalo wing. She repeats the question, thinking I've not heard. Does he have female parts? And this is where I pause. Because yes, my man's got female parts. He's got a liver and lungs and a back that stays ramrod straight, because height matters when you're a man. Yes, he has female parts. He's got a chest, smooth and flat, with 2 rough scars, symmetric from 2 careful cuts. He's got these hands, rough on one side, smooth and just a little furry on the other. He's got feet that get cold at night, calluses where his hiking boots chafe. And have I mentioned that he's got a cute round butt? Yes, he's got female parts. No, he's got no female parts, because his chest is smooth and flat. And when I spend the night on it, listening to him breathe, there's nothing missing there. No, he's got no female parts. Nothing I would name, clit, cunt, or pussy. Yes, doctor, our sex is high risk. Just last week, I rolled over on his cat. Mr. Grumbles is still mad at me. Don't worry, doctor, our sex is low risk. When I told him about the cute butch in the corner office, he just smiled and straddled me. Yes, doctor, he has all the parts, all of his own and all of mine.
Thank you, Dr. Kuhl. M. Garvey will read this next piece from Recognize the Voices of Bisexual Men.
Thank you. This is Say It Loud, I'm a Black bisexual male and I'm proud by Rodney Magruder Brown. Being born a Black male in America automatically puts me in the category of a stigmatized minority. Add bisexuality, and you have one of the most disenfranchised, underrepresented demographics in our country. There is a huge burden that comes with these intersectional identities. First, there's understanding and accepting what it means to be Black in America. Historically, Blacks have been second-class citizens who have sacrificed their lives and freedom for inalienable rights bestowed upon them by the American Constitution. Their struggle for equality has been met with raging opposition, including negative stereotypes of Blacks as lazy, dumb, and worthless. Now add male to that description. Black males in America have been portrayed in popular culture as hypermasculine and overly sexual. Add bisexuality into the mix, and now we have a dumb, lazy, over-sexualized, indecisive, hypermasculine individual. Living in a heteronormative society that embraces hegemonic masculinity takes courage because most, if not all, aspects of society are developed in contrast to the identity of Black bisexual males. For instance, the church is supposed to be a place of refuge, love, and acceptance, but instead it has become a breeding ground for hatred and intolerance. Specifically for me, the Black church offered no sanctum, no positive foundation for a male who identified as bisexual. Being bisexual challenges several religious expectations, such as monogamy, the role of a man, and sexual, physical, and emotional attraction. It should be noted historically that the Bible approved of practicing polygamy, but this was within the context of a heterosexual relationship. Even the American government offers no legislative support or initiative for BBM, even though this demographic is affected by the HIV/AIDS epidemic at a disproportionate rate. There should be an initiative by government-funded agencies, such as medical facilities that promote positive sexual behavior and identity. The education system also fails to meet the needs of BBM in the area of sex education. If the state has a sex education course, it is dedicated to a superficial understanding of heterosexual sex limited to vaginal and oral intercourse. Without support from society at large, creating a positive identity is a journey. And yet, this journey is imperative to one's happiness and well-being. My sexuality is something that is not completely obvious. It is something that I could hide and keep a secret. The same cannot be said for my race. When I walk into a room, the first thing most people will notice is that I'm a Black male. Being educated in institutions that were not predominantly Black proved to be a challenge. Oftentimes, I was in situations where I was the only Black guy. And in situations when I was not the only Black guy, I did not fit the stereotypes or ideas that people have about Black guys. Just as with my sexuality, my race was being attacked because once again, I did not fit into a box that society had built for me. My race came into question because I was not the stereotypical pants-sagging, gun-toting, unapproachable guy that our culture has unfairly labeled Black males to be. I'm very intelligent, articulate, well-dressed, and college-educated. I found myself having to defend my Blackness to Blacks as well as to people from other racial backgrounds. My heroes and role models were not limited to Black entertainers in sports or the music industry. I have a deeper connection with my racial history. I admire people such as James Baldwin, Bayard Rustin, and W.E.B. Du Bois. These were the men that I wanted to become. And since most people are not familiar enough with Black culture outside of the realm of entertainment and pop culture, I was always seen as somewhat of an outsider. Black men are viewed by the dominant culture from a monolithic perspective. When people encounter a dimension of Black culture that does not fit within familiar images, they often dismiss the Blackness of the subject. In the words of Henry Louis Gates, if there are 40 million Black Americans, then there are 40 million ways to be Black. Blacks face a unique challenge because the dominant culture doesn't view Black culture or view it in a positive manner, but any attempts to redefine Blackness or exemplify traits that do not correlate with societal expectations of Blackness are met with resistance. These attempts at confining Black culture happen from outside as well as within Black culture. It was through silencing negative distractions that I was able to hear my voice, a voice that knew bisexuality was not a conflict between my attraction to men and women, but rather a realization of the beauty in both sexes. By defining what being Black meant to me, I was becoming the man that I wanted to become. I was letting go of a dangerous trend of letting people define me. Once I began to seek self-affirming experiences, I no longer needed society's permission to be myself. Who am I? I'm Rodney McGruder Brown. I'm a proud Black bisexual man.
Thank you. Everyone will actually be taking part in this next reading from a piece called Pagan Polyamory.
In astrology, the moon is the planet of emotions and the inner self. It also rules that most emotional time of life, the parent-child bond, and parenting itself. Polyamorous parenting does seem to be one of the topics that gets everyone emotional, at any rate, when discussing the various merits of the lifestyle. Critics of polyamory worry that children will become confused by having more than two parents around. Defenders retort with lines about it taking a village to raise a child, and that they are creating their own carefully chosen village based on bonds of love.
The moral of this story is that poly-step parents, if chosen as carefully as you'd choose any person who will be dealing with your child, can be very important and useful to any kid's development. Auberon Zell Ravenheart points out that I consider it quite an honor when Zach introduces me to his friends as my dad. Being a poly-step parent is sort of like being a beloved uncle, like Uncle Fester of the Addams Family. You're not primarily responsible for discipline, but rather the mentorship aspect, introducing them to cool things, providing educational experiences, doing homeschooling, etc. Non-biological parents can often be deeply involved in coming-of-age rituals, as well as much of the deep personal counseling, such as feelings around sex, that kids may be reluctant to discuss with their biological parents.
Being polyamorous and pagan means that you are automatically members of two socially unusual subcultures, and that alone can sometimes bother the sort of child who desperately longs to be just like all the other kids. However, this is the same problem that any parents have who are not mainstream in some way, whether due to polyamory, non-heterosexuality, or being the only Jewish family in the Catholic town, or the only Black family in the white neighborhood.
Polly Pagan of Waterkin from New Zealand also stresses that having enough space for everyone is important. We have a large house with plenty of room for all three children, all three adults to be able to be together or have their separate space. That way, partners can bonk, sleep, and spend time with one another just as we feel like it, entirely spontaneously. Sometimes we bonk as a triad, mostly two of us sleep together, but the space is important. They have had no issues with their children relating to society as of yet. The kids' natural parents are two of us, but they relate to us as being their three parents. They know it's unusual, but have no problem with it at all, except in trying to explain our family to their friends. So they usually just skirt around and go play with their games.
It's common knowledge among many other subcultures, including people of color, queer folk, and other religious minorities, that it's best to teach your child pride in his or her family's difference as early as possible, and never show a lick of shame or doubt about its validity or worth as a lifestyle. Your children will watch you for cues, especially during the early years, and your conviction will become the foundation on which they build their opinions. Teaching them pride in their polyamorous family is as valid as teaching them pride in their minority ethnic heritage or minority faith. the worst thing you can do is hide from them, telling them that, quote, Uncle Steve is just a friend of the family. They'll figure it out sooner or later anyway. Kids are smarter than you'd think when it comes to that sort of thing, and they'll be unhappy that they were lied to.
One big worry of the anti-poly line of thought is the idea that if children growing up seeing polyamory as a normal option, they may well decide to be polyamorous themselves. Some poly folk, especially those whose children grew up in poly households but who are quite monogamous, scoff at the idea. They compare it to children of gay and lesbian parents, most of whom turn out to be heterosexual. Children make their own decisions as adults, they say, and point to various grandparents and friends as monogamous role models. However, our little demographic study saw a different picture. Unlike inborn sexual preference, polyamory is a cultural behavior that can be learned. And just as the anti-poly folk feared, more than half of the over 14 children raised in poly families are now polyamorous themselves. Of course, the real question is, why is this a bad thing? If the reason why so many beginning poly relationships fail miserably is, as most poly folk claim, that people aren't prepared to handle it and are not taught the relationship tools necessary to cope, then growing up in a poly family ought to give one a boost in that area. Do children who watch their parent group process and negotiate learn those skills better than those who only have two parents, possibly caught up in bad social patterns of how marriage ought to go as role models?
Since polyamory is not a legal form of marriage, it does mean that any lovers who are not legally married partners have no spousal rights under the law. This concerns many poly families, including Mara Wolf in Arizona. I've considered some form of legal action to protect Knight, since in our state, should I die, Storm would inherit everything as my surviving legal spouse. I don't want to see Knight thrown out with nothing. I don't believe that Storm would do that, but if something were to happen to me and Storm both, Knight would have no legal recourse or claim on anything other than his personal belongings, and that bothers me.
One bisexual poly man laughed. When heterosexual people become poly, they are confronted for the first time by the idea that they might have vitally important relationships that nobody is going to honor legally, much less socially. They find out what it's like to have to worry about who will boycott their commitment ceremony and what happens if somebody is ill and in the hospital and the lover that they need to see can't get in. Queers have been struggling with these issues for decades. Welcome to the club. He stresses, however, that there are alternatives. With the exception of petty company issues such as insurance, all the legal benefits of a heterosexual marriage can be created with good paperwork. Get legal help and put it together. Medical power of attorney, legal power of attorney, and an ironclad will that states who gets what, including children. If you're a threesome and two partners are married, let the third one, the one with the most to lose, be the executor of the will, if it seems appropriate. Make this will public. Give copies of it to your relatives, even the hostile ones, so that they can't say that they didn't know. If they call in a rage, refer them to your lawyer. Most importantly, do these things early in the process, while everyone is hale and healthy.
Thank you, Hector. Our last reading tonight will be performed by Dr. Nathan Krieger.
Same Shit, Complicated by Kimya Dawson. You were looking down at them. They were looking down at you. You were starched and pressed. They were all disheveled. They were holding hands. They were ragamuffins, and they said, I know we're not fancy, but we're on the same level. We've got plans, big plans. We're going to change the world. All you care about is dollars. That doesn't make sense. All you do is hit snooze, watch the news, buy shoes, drink booze, make money, feel spent, and day after day after day, it's the same shit. Then you look at them without batting an eye and say, hey, little hippie, let your freak flag fly. Why don't you go smoke a bowl in your best tie-dye? Get a tattoo of a dancing bear holding a peace sign. You can talk the talk, but when it comes to real change, are you and all your little friends exactly the same? You sit around in potlucks, pointing fingers, placing blame, drinking kombucha and eating tempeh, and day after day after day, it's the same shit. If you are judging them while they are judging you, and you think that makes them assholes, maybe you're an asshole too. Do we argue with each other until we both turn blue, or find similarities in what we like and what we do? Yeah, just because someone doesn't look like me doesn't mean they're a cheap clone or a sheep. Maybe they like their job and they're living their dream, and they love their friends and their family. Yes, some people thrive between 9 to 5 and feel like they're choking if their neck's not tied. And some people feel as if they're gonna die if their seams aren't straight and their shoes not tied. Some people like business, some people like numbers, some people grow organic heirloom cucumbers and only feel free with their hands in the dirt in a pair of old jeans and their favorite t-shirt. Some people feel enslaved when they have a boss. Some people feel without one, totally lost. To make this world work, it takes all different kinds. We have different tastes, different strengths, different minds. So it doesn't make sense to generalize, and it doesn't make sense to judge with our eyes. We need more compassion. We need to be kind. If you open your heart, you might like what you find, because there are some nice bus drivers and there's some mean bus drivers, and there's some nice cops in Madison, Wisconsin, and there's some nice teachers and there's some mean teachers. Just because you got a mean teacher doesn't mean all teachers suck, and no one is nice all the time. No one is mean all the time. Think about what someone's going through that's making them be mean to you. Like maybe their pet gerbil died and they are really sad inside. Or maybe they got in a fight with someone that they really liked. Or maybe they're really shy and don't know how to socialize. May just want to run and hide, not saying it's justified, but if we learn to empathize, the resentments will vaporize. Situations metamorphosize before our very eyes. Then the need to stereotype will become outdated when we realize that everyone is really complicated. We are all so complicated. I am also complicated. I'm a Black mom, a lactivist, a home-owning punk. It's been over a decade since the last time I got drunk. I drive a minivan and I've got junk in the trunk. I think Danny DeVito is a total hunk. I like revisiting the shit my therapist helps me remember. Being friends with someone for a long time, still not knowing their gender. I fight for equal rights. I fight for inner peace. And I pray for the dead. I pray to the dead for the gratitude I need. I've got chickens in my backyard and a little garden plot. I really hate commercials, but I got a slap chop because I'm a sucker for a remix. Let me tell you what, by the time that I'm finished, you're gonna love these nuts. I'm a little bit pop culture, a lot bit DIY. I don't know the different definition of TMI. I write poems about my period, post pictures of my log. If you don't like body functions, you shouldn't read my blog. My husband's a musician from the mountains of France. He wrote me a song. We did an interpretive dance. Then he knocked me up. Now we have the coolest kid. Yeah, hooking up with him's the smartest thing I ever did. And I feel like I can fly when I'm on roller skates, and I get a little high when I eat dried dates. I feel like I'm unloading when I'm loading up the car. I feel like I'm exploding when I'm holding my guitar. I don't understand what numbers have to do with success or what sales have to do with happiness, unless they're the kind of sales that will carry me to see where my grandma and grandpa are waiting for me. I never thought I'd make it to 25. Now I'm 37 and I'm glad I'm alive. If I ever need a tour bus, I'm still gonna drive because I like looking out the windshield as the world goes by.
Thank you. So I would like to say thank you to our performers tonight. You all did a really great job. Big thank you to everyone who joined to listen to the LGBTQ+ Resource Center Queer Dramatic Readings, Invisible Identities. We hope you enjoyed the event. Oftentimes the silent intersecting identities of others gets forgotten as more obvious identities are focused on. Remember to listen to the unheard and often silenced voices of others. Thank you all again, and please be sure to check for the evaluation link in the chats and fill out the form for tonight's events. And have a wonderful night. I think they have it in the chat there. Yep. Thank you.